Hey there, I'm Fly Fish Dan, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Fly Fish Dan. Anyway, if you like videos like this, give me a thumbs up and consider leaving me a comment and tell me what you think of this video. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. You won't regret it. Let's do this. Fish on. That's another log on the fire. So how long have I been fly fishing? Gosh, I've been fly fishing now for, let's see, over 50, and my first time out was 17 years old. So my dad, of course, I fished my entire life, right? I mean, my dad and I fished from the time I was old enough to be able to stay in the boat without falling out. So I've been fishing since I was 2-3 years old with my dad, and doing a lot of the traditional fishing for salmon and trout, and started spin casting, when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. And then my dad got into fly fishing, and he bought me my first fly rod setup. It was just this little Cortland with Cortland reels, so kind of a beginning level fly rod and reel, and I still have that today too, by the way. Something that, how do you get rid of your first fly rod? 6 weight. And he took me to Dry Falls Lake. So Dry Falls Lake is over in eastern Washington. It's this great fishery, and amazing too. Dry Falls has changed a ton over the years. There was some geological event that changed the level of the lake, and now a lot of areas of the lake that I used to fish way back when are now no longer accessible. But he taught me how to fly fish when I was 17 years old, and caught my very first trout on a fly rod at Dry Falls. Shortly after, we fished this other series of lakes. They're in the Crab Creek reservoirs over by Vantage, and Lanice was always pretty easy to access, and so was Lake Mary. More of a hike into Lake Mary, but those are the places where I really cut my teeth on fly fishing. And looking back on some of the pictures, we're just in one of those float tubes that are like this little donut, right, to where almost your entire body is sitting in the water, and about from your midsection up is all that you had to be able to cast. So I thank God for innovation, right, in pontoon boats and things like that to keep you out of the water a little bit more. But we used to use those traditional float tubes and fish those desert lakes for trout. And that's once my first time fly fishing, when I caught a just pretty small fish, but it wasn't tiny, but it wasn't huge on a fly rod, but it felt bigger than anything that I caught on traditional gear. I think that was the appeal to me, was kind of the how the fish felt when you got it on a fly rod. And then soon after that, it was the challenge, right? It's the challenge of being able to make the cast and make the presentation and choose the right fly, and figuring out what's happening on the water, right, based off of what you're seeing. If you've got these damselfly nymphs swimming around, well, obviously you tie on a damselfly. If he's from the character of how the fish will take flies. I mean, you're choosing your fly based off of what you see, what's happening, both with the fish and what's happening on the lake or river or wherever you're fishing. But I started off in a lake, and that first time out is all it took, and I fished every possible moment that I had. I would be out there fly fishing. I had a buddy of mine I met at work, and I needed a rear end changed in I had an old 80s big old Blazer, and I blew out the rear end, and this guy at work was pretty mechanically inclined, so I asked him if he would help me change the rear end, because I was broke back then, so I wanted to do it myself. And in trade, I taught him how to fly fish. Or actually, our first trip was out in the Sound fishing for salmon, but we talked about fly fishing, and he asked me if I would teach him, and so I did. And oh my God, the adventures that Gene and I had I mean, there's just too many to count. From those same desert lakes that I learned at, I mean, we would go bell to bell. We would leave the house at 2:30 in the morning in the summer, and I wouldn't get home until midnight that same day, and we would fish from dawn to dusk. I mean, we were just maniacs out there fishing. It was so crazy. It was so much fun. The adventures that we have fly fishing, from fishing for the trout in the desert lakes to, there was this lake in eastern Washington that used to be just loaded full of these beautiful Lahontan cutthroat, and we had one particular time, it was unfreaking believable the amount of fish that we caught. So much fun, something I'll never forget. One of the funnest fishing trips that I can remember with Gene was on that day, fishing for Lahontan cutthroat. But yeah, so I've got my my dad to thank for teaching me how to fly fish, and you know, my dad's still with us. He lives on the East Coast. Doesn't fly fish as much anymore. He just turned 81. But hopefully I'll get another trip with my dad maybe one day before he gets too old. So love to do that again. But got some wonderful memories from my dad, from both freshwater fishing to river fishing. He guided in Montana for a lot of years, trout fishing with him a ton. So I owe most everything I know about fly fishing to my dad, and then of course just through experiences, and I mean now fly fishing for what, well over 30 years, almost 35 years. Yeah, I love fly fishing, and will continue to do it until I can't lift a rod anymore.